I'm Sharon. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I was recently watching a documentary on the excavation of a tomb that was found in the Saqqara Desert in Egypt. I think it's called The Secret of the Saqqara. It's on Netflix actually. It was so fascinating and it reminded me of when I was a young child being taught in school about the tomb of Tutankhamun. And I remember being so thrilled and absolutely fascinated with the whole subject. And it still fascinates me now, but history generally fascinates me because I think probably just because I'm a little bit nosy and I want to know, well, what was it like? And well, what did they do? And what did they wear? And how did they work? And what was life like? And there are so many questions. And it absolutely fascinates me how just by the patient digging away of layers and layers and layers of sand can unearth such amazing treasures. And in this documentary, we find that it may actually even rewrite history a little bit for us and give us so much more information than we had never known. The one thing about history is that sometimes, though, it does create more questions than it gives answers. And it got me thinking about how we can kind of do an archaeological dig. We can excavate so many subjects. Even in the art world, for example, we can peel back the layers on a canvas using infrared technology and so many other sort of camera devices, spectrographs, something like that. It fascinates me to see how they can see the artist changing his mind, looking behind the layers of paint. And even as simple as just cleaning off the dirt off a painting can reveal so much more. And even it uncovers kind of botched jobs that have been done. And some of the kind of restoration attempts are absolutely hilarious, aren't they? You think you'd have been better leaving it well alone, leave it to the masters, as it were. And I think that perhaps explains why I just love music theory, because it helps us to peel back the layers and look into the composer's mind. And if you're playing a piece of music, I strongly suggest that you do a little bit of background reading on the composer or the period of history at the time, because then not only do you get to play the piece of music, but you get to delve inside the composer's mind, see what he was up to, see how he was composing, yes, of his time and or her time in the style of the period, but also how they perhaps broke outside of that period, and also what world were they living in. So then you're not only just playing the piece of music, you're dipping your toes into history again, aren't you? And I had a nostalgic trip down memory lane when I was rummaging through some books of mine, and I've been doing some work on this opera by Purcell, Dido and Aeneas. Excuse the plethora of sticky notes. These are just little things that I want to just kind of find out a little bit more about. And inside it I see that all of the annotations and analysis, all the notes are there from my previous head of music, and it's so fascinating. And I see that the composer was influenced by a certain French style because of who tutored him and who was sent to France by the court of Charles I to research into French composition techniques, and that then explains so much of what follows throughout the whole of the work. However, it does raise more questions sometimes, because in this vocal score that I'm not really using as such, but just using it as a springboard to further reading, one of the arias, one of the solos, is actually written here suggesting it's for Belinda, whereas in the Eulenburg orchestral score it says it's for Dido. It's like, which one was it? Why has it changed? And it's so interesting to me to delve into the history of this. And then it just sort of really gets my imagination fired up, because it places the piece of music in context. And it gets me wondering, well, what was life like for these people? How does that influence how the composer writes his music and so on? And this was written kind of just about the time of Charles II. And that would have been Restoration England. And as I was reading through some of the notes, just general reading, and it reminded me of a spy thriller that I read years and years ago. And so I think, oh, do you know, I loved this book so much. It was written about a fictitious character, Thomas Challoner, who was kind of a spy in Restoration London. So it'd be about that time. And he himself was a musician, the protagonist was, and he played the viola da gamba. And if I remember rightly, he was finding clues written in bits of really undecipherable, unpleasant music as it seemed at the time. There's no way they'd have been composing atonal pieces then. And so this hid the secrets to some kind of spy espionage. And I just love the details of history. So yes, the character was fictitious, but it really gives me a taste of what was going on at the time of Purcell's composition. Or slightly before that actually, but you know, that period in history. And if I remember rightly, at the time they thought cucumbers were poisonous, and this was the time where coffee houses were really just kind of starting. Although the coffee itself was undigestible, it was really strong and unpleasant to taste unless you ladled loads of sugar in it. But many at the time were then realising that the sugar came from slave plantations, and so they were sort of not having the sugar, but then the coffee was unbearable, so they had to do without the coffee as well. So I think I might just have to give this another read just to kind of further academic research. I think is a fascinating read, as I remember rightly, and it really does give a flavour of the society and the history and the living conditions at the time. And also because of the protagonist being a musician, it does give a taste of the music of that time as well, in a very everyday kind of setting, although fictitious, still based very much on fact, as it were. And I really do recommend that you just do some archaeological digging in the music that you're playing, because it will really blossom out so much more from the playing that you can get, that you will be digging into what was it like at the time. I know, for example, that in the grade 3 piano syllabus, there's a lovely little piece by Beethoven. It's a Scottish dance, an écossaise, which is a bit of a conundrum when you think it's a Scottish dance written in French. You think, well, you know, a lot of Beethoven's music is quite brooding, and he was a fairly brooding character, wasn't he? But if you dig into the history of the period, you find out that that was when the Napoleonic Wars were ongoing, and it went on for such a long time. And so it really does help to give you a flavour. And as you're playing these pieces of music, you can just dip your toes into history a little bit. And if you want to dig a little deeper, to continue the archaeological metaphor, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, and so we've dusted away the sand, we've got the paintbrush and we've dusted away the sand, and now we get the tweezers out. And if you want to look really at the fine detail, this is where your music theory really does come to the fore, because if you really get to grips with your music theory and you start understanding the key structures, the arpeggio structures, the chord structures, the key changes, what the cadence points are doing, how the composer is using different stylistic devices. It's so fascinating to see what's going on in between all of the notes, and how the composer is creating these musical effects within the constraints and the forms of the time. So he may be composing in binary form or sonata form, or you know, whatever structure it is, a rondo form. However, within those prescribed formulas, he's creating his own particular flavour. And it's really, really fascinating to just see what the composer's driving at by analysing all the fine details. And so your music theory really does give so much more depth to what you are playing as well. And so I really do recommend that you just dig into your music theory and just take a moment to do a bit of general background reading on whatever piece it is that you're playing. You know, what is an écossaise? What is a bagatelle? Or what is this or that, and how would it relate to the instrument? What was the composer doing at that time? What was going on in history? I mean, if Beethoven was writing fairly brooding pieces, although in honesty the écossaise is a jolly little piece, it's a Scottish dance, so it's going to be jolly, isn't it? It's no wonder if the Napoleonic Wars are going on in the background. I mean, who knows if, you know, cannonballs are flying as he's composing. And also when you think about his personal history, his father was a drunkard who made him practice for endless hours into the night and hoped to make him this sort of wonderful child prodigy spectacle like Mozart, no doubt to cash in on it, not through any altruistic hopes for his son's future, just to kind of cash in. And so, you know, it's no wonder he was a little bit grumpy at the time. And maybe that will help us to see what's driving the composer and what's underneath the surface of some of the pieces that he composes. And so I do recommend that you take kind of a shovel to dig away the layers a little bit, get a general overview of the shape of things and the pieces that you're playing, and then get a brush and just brush away the dust and find out some of the more detail that's going on, and even grab a pair of tweezers and delve into the harmonic analysis a little bit and look at the key structure and look at the form of the piece that you're playing, because you'll get so much more enjoyment out of it. You'll do a far better job, I'm sure, if you understand what's going on in the music that you're playing. And I just think music's a subject that we love, so why not delve in and have a good old archaeological dig, and let's see what lies beneath the surface of the music that we play. I hope that's helpful to you. Thanks for listening. Bye.